Thanks very much for the invite. And, good afternoon, everyone. I'm actually going to talk mostly about the characterization techniques here. I'm going to do really a rather broad survey, and I'm going to make it very practical, very focused on what you need to do as an experimentalist, and particularly interpreting data. But firstly, I was thinking after Thomas's introduction this morning that if antiferromagnetic materials really wipe out ferromagnetic materials from data recording, will there be any use for them? So I did a bit of research and I just found a couple of niche areas where ferromagnetism might still be useful. Because where you actually need the stray field. So if you want to energize your cat, you still need to use a ferromagnet for the cat jewelry. Obviously this guy here needs some energizing. But here's something interesting. You can buy it from Amazon. If you get bored in the talk, you can order one of these right away if you wish. So there's a lot of interesting physics in here, these magnetic shoe inserts. So you can see how they work. It's a negative magnetic field, it's obviously very important. Penetrates into the body. You can see the use of neodymium to get right into your feet. And that deflects the positive ions. Look, and if you haven't got it yet, here it is. The pain goes like that, but the magnetic soul suck up the pain from your feet. I'm thinking of getting a franchise for this.
How much are those?
You have to Google it. Okay, so there's a long list of. No, that's a very small point. There's a long list of topics here. I'll try to go over them in a systematic way, but I won't be able to cover everything. But after Hire asked me to do this, I realized I was asking, it's really a rather broad area. So I'll be asking, okay, you want to measure the neochemistry, you want to measure the anisotropy, what techniques are available to you? And what's practical and what's not practical? How many people here are experimentalists? Yeah, show of hands. Theorists? Okay, about 50. So, hopefully there will be some direct relevance to people who are experimentalists, but also to people who are theorists. Just if you want to ask experimental colleagues to investigate some predictions and so on, it's useful to have an idea of what's feasible and what's available. I'll say almost nothing about growth techniques. There's Richard Campion's talking on Friday about the development that's gone on at Nottingham and Prague and other places. There's a development of the antiferromagnetic epitaxy material. So I'll say rather little about this. This is the MBE machine, one of the MBE machines at Nottingham, one of the MBE machines in Prague. I'll just say a couple of points. But generally, molecular beam epitaxy is very good if you want good epitaxial crystal quality. You normally, in all our applications, we're always thinking about thin films. If you want to make electronic devices, ultimately you want thin films. You can have very good control of stoichiometry, good temperature, and at best you really can have monolayer by monolayer growth. The atoms arriving at the surface, having wide surface mobility, moving to step edges, and you can produce heterostructures that are broken into bases. On the other side, it's very slow, it's very expensive. So at Nottingham, which is the growth, might only produce one sample in a day. And that's not because he's lazy, it's because he's very careful as he's managed. It's very good if you come up with a material which is compatible with a commercial semiconductor material. That's because of all the MBE research that's been done on those type of materials. Okay? So if you come up with a couple of different alternatives, if something will grow on gallium phosphide or silicon, then you much more likely to find an MBE grower that will have a go at growing it. It turns out that for any given machine, the grower will only normally allow a certain fairly limited set of materials in there. They're very worried understandably about cross-contamination. Normally you can't have things like oxygen in as well. Sputtering, on the other hand, can get very near epitaxial growth. It's much more flexible, it's cheaper, it's faster, so you can actually do things like draw wedges of different thicknesses across them, and so on. You can produce many samples very quickly. You can do things working reactive gases, particularly good for oxide. If you can get access to both of these types of systems, then so the better. Once you've grown a layer, I'll make it sound easy, just grown like that for 2 slides, you need to characterize the structure. And the obvious first thing you do is put it into some reasonably high resolution X-ray diffraction system. To determine the structure, you'll need the wave vector of the X-rays to be comparable with the reciprocal lattice vector, and that corresponds to tens of killer electron volts. Tens of killer electron volts is large compared to Phonon and Magnon energies, so it's going to be essentially elastic. There are inelastic X-ray scattering techniques where you look at these tiny changes very hard, very specialized. Okay, an undergraduate slide. You've got a wave vector going in, a wave vector going out. You're going to scatter by a reciprocal lattice vector. And you're going to end up producing, effectively, a map of the structure in K-space rather than real space. So what you're doing, effectively, when you look at the scattering amplitude, is you're taking a Fourier transform of the electron distribution in the solid. So from that, you can look at peak positions. That will give you the translational symmetries and tell you what the atoms are in the basis. The peak intensities, the modulation of the intensities, will tell you about the types of atoms in the basis. If you've got dissimilar atoms in there, which normally would have, it will tell you about order disorder. If you have something like gallium manganese arsenide, where you're randomly substituting manganese for gallium, it will tell you about the degree of disorder in there to an extent. Peak widths will tell you about the extent of periodicity, the size of your crystallites or the mosaic crystals in a film. It will also depend on the width of the film. So, this is actually one, I think might be one Lau's first picture of, I'm sure he didn't refer to it as a Lau pattern, and he took this pattern, he couldn't actually decipher it. So he showed it to the Braggs, and they worked out the sodium chloride structure from that. Here's something more complicated. This is myoglobin. It's a protein from sperm whales, this one, from crystallite. I don't suppose any of you are working on that thing. No. But what struck me is, I don't know if you can see this, it's all the orders of diffraction. Here's 18, 1, minus 2, 27, minus 4, 0. So someone's actually taken that pattern and with about 3,000 diffraction points and worked out the position of 3,000 atoms in the basics there. Oh, it's worthless. So this is a structure that was actually built by hand in 1957, which is the structure of that protein. So I show you this so that when you give your crystallographers a sample, they come back and say, it's terribly difficult. try doing that by hand. You've got computer programs to help you out here. Of course, what you don't have is you don't have a magic algorithm which will take you from measured scattered intensities to a unique structure. And that's partly because you've lost the phase information. So normally you have to build models, but there are tools to help you do that. So solving the structure. So this is the material we're going to hear a lot about, the copper manganese arsenide. So here's just a little bit of the distribution of intensities in phase space. And from that, Zarian Pete, that's no better. Worked out that it was a tetragonal structure with a little bit of distortion, and it was actually growing with its cubic in-plane axis rotated by 45 degrees. So what can you get out of it apart from the structure? As I say, you can get some fairly direct measure of crystalline quality. So this was the gallium manganese arsenide growing on gallium arsenide where the lattice match wasn't so good. And here you see a relatively broad peak. Notice the log scale here. Grow it on gallium phosphide, much smaller half width there, much higher intensity of the peak. So obviously, in some way, the material grown on the gallium arsenide is a poorer quality than that grown on the gallium phosphide. So here it turns out it seems to be pretty much fully strained. That is, in its relaxed structure, if it existed freestanding, it would have a lattice parameter that's really rather close to that of the gallium phosphide, but it's actually grown on the gallium phosphide and it's retaining the lattice parameter imposed on it by the gallium phosphide. So here is the 002 peak of the copper manganese arsenide, and its position is plotted here with respect to it's the diagonal lattice parameter of the gallium phosphide. And you see, you can't see a deviation from it, so it's imposing its in-plane lattice parameter on the gallium phosphide. That wasn't the case on the gallium manganese arsenide. It wasn't the case in the copper manganese arsenide, but it's inferred that it's actually a mosaic block. Oh, this is an older piece of work. I'll refer a bit to gallium manganese arsenide, which we all spent rather a lot of time trying to make ferromagnetic at room temperature. I'll ask you now, please don't be asking me, can we achieve ferromagnetism in gallium manganese arsenide at room temperature? Because for many years, that's the only question I ever seem to get asked, no matter what topic I have to talk about. So here, this is a reflection that should be vertically aligned, and this is gallium manganese arsenide grown on gallium arsenide, and that's aligned really rather well. But then if you look at the outer plane lattice parameter, you see these moving apart, and you can plot lattice parameters against concentration. In this case, we did some modeling, and it tells you about the degree of incorporation, the number of interstitials, the number of substitutional sites. So you get this sort of information from the X-ray scattering. You get a bit of other information which is often useful. Here, normal Bragg scattering off the lattice planes. But if you have a thin film, you're going to get some scattering off the top and the bottom surface of that plane, simple diffraction. And then you can get what are called Keating fringes. And here, I don't know if you can read that up very well. Right here, these peaks are out at tens of degrees. This is actually looking at peak, associated with reflection at a very, very small angle, and you see these fringes. And you can fit this. It's another example from silicon germanium I just picked up. So this is a thin film of silicon germanium. It's broadened because it is a thin film. But it's got reasonably nice Keating fringes on it, so you can fit that, and it gives you rather a lot of information. It gives you thickness, but it gives you some information about the quality of the interface as well. Rhodium ions we've mentioned a few times already. I'll mention it again, I think, near the end. Interesting material that you cool it down goes from antiferromagnetic to ferromagnetic. So this is a really very nice, just epitaxial film of rhodium ion IMGO. And you can see the quality of the interfaces from the number of these fringes here. So this has actually been modelled by this distribution of density to get that fit. We're going rather fast. Slow down a bit. I was nervous about having too much material. Okay, so this is a high quality TEM image again of copper manganese arsenide. I'll just say a little bit more about the structure you can see here. But here you've got some really rather nice Z contrast. You can see variations in intensities along these rows. Very hard to get images of this quality. This is scanning transmission electron microscopy. Normally, you will have to you have to find a friendly TEM person who can get excited about the structure to get them to do this sort of work. It's very specialised, very difficult, but expensive machines which have to be installed in obviously very low vibration environments and so on. When you look at images like this, one thing you should bear in mind is always, it's very easy to think I'm looking at atoms. Okay, these little blobs here are actually atoms. okay? But you're not looking at a monolayer on the surface, it's in transmission, okay? And these thick samples are typically about 100 nanometers thick, okay? So you're looking down at these columns of atoms, one above the other, okay? So if, for instance, there was quite a high density of point defects in there, you might not see it in this, okay? If 1% of the atoms were missing, it would probably look pretty much the same, unless those led to more extended defects. So this is now modelling the model structure, what you expect in intensity distribution has been calculated compared to what you see. And you see it's really, really rather good. Here, however, is a bit of a problem because there it looks great, here not so great. There's clearly a defect in here. And what's happening is that the unit cell in the copper manganese arsenide vertically is about twice as big as the step height on the surface, and here's a step. And it's nucleating an antiphase boundary, which is the one here, which is running right the way up through the structure. So very often the case, if you nucleate a defect near the surface, it will tend to propagate right through. Right. These little ugly purple boxes are prompts to me, as you might need to say something like TEM, I suppose. You've got to be careful how you talk to them, okay? Because it's really hard work. You know, a lot of it is the craft of making these really, really thin samples. You know, I was saying 100 nanometers thick. You know. You've got to be incredibly skilled. It's a real craft. So don't take the work lightly. But on the other hand, there are some problems you can come into with talking to TEM people. And that is, for instance, when we got this image, we thought, that's fantastic, that's absolutely brilliant. And we didn't think to ask the obvious question, how typical is that? Because, of course, you want to produce a beautiful image, so you look around, you know, this bit's got horrible, this bit's contaminated, this bit's got loads of dislocations, so you don't bother with them, right? So the typical TEM picture is usually the best one we ever produced. On the other hand, you can run into other problems, collaborating with one TEM person. And I used to give them samples and I'd ring them up and say, how does it look? And they'd say, it's really interesting. And my heart would sing because that would mean that it was full of really interesting defects. Whereas I really wanted a very uninteresting sample. I'll say a bit about neutron scattering. Elastic neutron scattering is the definitive way to show the existence of magnetic warfare, and particularly antiferromagnetic warfare. If you can also do inelastic neutron scattering, then you can find information about phonons, not interested in this meeting, or magnons. So if you work it out, you want the wave vector of your neutrons to be of order 10 to the 10 per meter. Put the numbers in, and that comes out, well, 3 10 to the 10 is 25 milli-electron volts. So you want thermal neutrons. So thermal neutrons have wave vectors comparable to the reciprocal lattice. But 25 millieV is also a typical room temperature energy of a phonon, and magnons are going to be of order a millieV as well. So these are very good probes for inelastic scattering, which I'll say something about in a little while. So what can you see? It helps a lot if your transition temperature, this is diffraction from an antiferromagnetic materials we're most interested in here. It really helps a lot if that you can access a system where you can get reasonably well below and well above the Néel temperature to see the difference. So here's a material, Néel temperature about 120 Kelvin. Above, you see the structurally allowed peaks. Okay? So this is the unit cell. So there's a whole series of peaks which are not all structured because of their particular unit cell basis. And then you go down through the neo temperature and new peaks appear here. Because suddenly you've got this extra periodicity in the structure, or you can have this extra periodicity in the structure. If the antiferromagnetic bonding was one spin up in one unit cell, the other spin down in the next unit cell, then effectively you've got twice the periodicity. Here's an example where the structurally forbidden 111 peak is absent in the paramagnetic state and strongly present in the antiferromagnetic state. Copper manganese arsenide, here having to work up to significantly higher temperatures, which is not easy. This is all done at ISIS. And this is this structurally forbidden 1 peak, and it's clearly present at 300K, it's absent at 500K, so the neo temperature is somewhere between that. You can also refer to this in which plane the moments are, and you can also, by comparison with calculations, you say roughly what the moment is. Well, more than roughly, 3.6 or magnetons in this case. If you do it as a function of temperature, you get a whole series of peaks, and you can see this clearly declining, and our best estimate of the neo temperature of this material is about 480 Kelvin. One thing to note here is this is a count rate, and it's not very high. Okay, you can see statistical fluctuations when you have numbers which are down in the tens. It's going to be quite low, and this is because you're working with a thin film. So it's easy. I didn't emphasize this, did I? I mean, this would have been a bulk crystal. Someone's taken a crystal which might be a centimetre cube or something. You get lots of scattering off that. If you go down to something that's maybe only 30, 40 nanometers thick, I think this one's more like 100 nanometers thick, you've still not got a lot of material to scatter off, so it's really quite hard. Inelastic neutrons. I'm getting through physics here, aren't I? So, a same picture from the undergraduate course. Whereas now, the only difference is, in this process, you can either emit or absorb a particle, a phonon or a magnon, say. Oh, that's from my that's from an undergraduate course that I teach, third year solid state physics. It's very dispiriting sometimes. And you're all here because you're wildly enthusiastic about it. It's not always the case. I taught a whole course, in a whole section on magnetism. I asked one question about antiferromagnetism. It's our style to put something really easy at the beginning so they get a few marks, no matter. And I asked them just to simply explain what is an antiferromagnetic material. And someone in the exam wrote, it's a material that protects you against ferromagnetism. Like an antibiotic. I really hope they didn't attend my lecture. I would hate to think of it. So, this is just my cartoon of a 1D diamagnetic chain, undergraduate course here. This is harmonic forces holding atoms together. You cause a displacement, you work out what the resulting mechanical motion is, and you get these dispersion relationships in a periodic structure. So you get acoustic-like modes where pretty much the atoms are moving in phase, and then you get these optical modes where they're moving out of phase. This is in a real substance can reasonably be like this. Germanium, you can tell. And here, of course, you can have acoustic modes and optical modes, but you've also got the additional degree of freedom of transfers and longitude. Magnons. feel like I'm moving into dangerous territory with Helen's hat at the front here now. Very simple pictures here. So the simplest nearest neighbour exchange 1B. So for ferromagnets, you can go through a classical argument, you can go through a quantum argument, but you come to pretty much the same dispersion relationship. So if you've got no anisotropy here, small k, it just rises quadratically with a prefactor d, which is the spin stiffness. More interesting for us is if there's a uniaxial anisotropy present, it's gapped. There's a finite energy to excite that 0K mode. If you do the measurement, again, just take a picture of the tell. Here it's rather nice, isn't it? In manganese platinum, something with a reasonably strong anisotropy. So this is just the Magnon energy against the wave vector squared. It's at low k, it's a nice linear dependence, and the intercept here is not zero. So you can almost read off that in this material there's an anisotropy energy of order 70 or so micro electron volts, which is quite strong for a ferromagnet. Antiferromagnetic Magnons are more complicated. You did say I could completely ignore quantum mechanics this morning, so I tend to do. If you go through the simplest argument, you assume that the exchange energy is by far the strongest energy in the problem. You can work out an expression rather straightforwardly for what the dispersion should be like. And without anisotropy, it turns out to be linear. And the prefactor to the K here is the exchange, like the exchange energy to our lattice constant. If you now put in the anisotropy, rather than it's gapped, it's got a finite energy of 0K, but rather than being the anisotropy energy now, it's this spin flip energy. It's got the square root of the product of the exchange and the anisotropy. So this is going to be a bigger number. If you look at manganese fluoride, then what you find is that there's really quite a big gap here. It's of order 1 milli-electron volt. So if you can measure the Magnons, you can get information about the exchange energies, about the anisotropy energies. But again, it's okay, these are all bulk. In a bulk material, it's doable, but in a thin film to do Magnon dispersions is incredibly hard. Oh, there's another example. So this is a material I know very little about, but it's a material with very strong spin-orbit coupling, just showing, this is from PRL, just showing that you can have really quite strong, really quite large gaps here. So indicative of, this is now 10 million electron volts, extremely strong spin-orbit coupling with their influence. Okay, so you can excite Magnons, Magnons can be excited thermally, or they can be excited by firing neutrons in. But it's interesting to try and drive the system and look for resonances. Okay, so if there are quasi-particles in the Magnons, then you should be able to excite them, and you might be able to get resonant absorption. And that's what you do in magnetic resonance. So now, the piece of material is usually in a DC applied field, and perpendicular to that, a time-varying microwave field, usually of that order, RF or microwave antiferromagnets. And then there's a tell formula for, in the simplest approximation here, of what you should get. And if you look at it, if you just put the, oh sorry, yeah, you have to worry about demagnetizing factors in here, okay, because it's the internal field which is going to drive the motion. But if you look at this, you see that at zero applied field, then the only thing left is the square root of omega k squared. So you get just the same result. So the energy of this magnon in the limit of low field and low k is the same as the ferromagnetic resonance absorption frequency, or the frequency is the same as the ferromagnetic resonance absorption frequency. That makes sense because if you're trying to drive it with photons here, then the ratio of energy to K is very large, so they can only really excite down to the limit of very small. So what have we got? We've got excited modes down near 0K, and the resonant frequencies are in the region of 10 to 1 to 10 gigahertz. So that's an actual dynamic time scale or speed for the ferromagnets. There's an example of some cobalt clusters where it has anomalously large anisotropy in this case because they're all lining up in rows or something. But you can see the qualitative behavior. And you can do ferromagnetic resonance as a function. And also you can get information about the symmetry and quantitative information about the anisotropy as well. But we were interested in the antiferromagnets. So now if we go into low temperature, the antiferromagnetic magnons in this simple picture are going to have energy roughly square root of the product of the exchange in the anisotropy energy. So that's a lot bigger than the exchange energy, anisotropy energy alone. And now, here's magnets 4 or 2 again. And now suddenly we've got the orders of magnitude larger. The resonant frequency at zero temperature is about 260 gigahertz. And this is really nice piece of work as well because you can track the actual frequency as it heads down towards zero. And in some studies, people have gone all the way down to within about 5% of the Newton. And so now, as has been said many times already, even though we're just going in this meeting, is the natural speed of the dynamics now is going up towards the terahertz. Oh, there's a more complicated material. So now we've got more than one equivalent. We've got several inequivalent positions for the manganese moments in this case. So you get modes that look somewhat acoustic-like, but rather flat modes that look more optical. Quite well. Stuff beyond things. So I'm treating it like a lecture, so I'm allowed to tell people off. Well, friends, anyway. All right, so let's get on to some fairly standard magnetic characterization. Obviously, the first thing you do is not take your sample off to a Newton relation source. You do this sort of routine measurement first. So the first thing you do with a ferromagnet is look at the remanence. Okay, this is the way to do it. So what you typically do is you apply a field along the easy axis, if you know what the easy axis is. Easy axis now. And you cool the sample down the field, take it down to very low temperature, take the field off, and multiply it. Because you want to look at the remanence, the real signature of a ferromagnetic order. This is an arsenide sample where actually field cool and the remnant data is very, very similar. That's unusual, that's because this is a nice uniaxial material which shows really quite nice single crystal behavior. Single domain behavior. Having said that, the field cool data has something subtracted off it because you're going to have some thin film of your material of interest on in our case, on a substrate. It's going to be on a substrate sometime. So your thin film is like 10, 20 nanometers, but your substrate is going to be more like 0.5 millimeters, 300 nanometers, 500 nanometers. So the diamagnetic response of the substrate always has to be allowed for. So here's an attempt, what we call an experiment where we hope to see nothing. Now, because we've gone to the antiferromagnetic copper manganese arsenide. And here, you can see the diamagnetic contributions, it's negative, and you can see some paramagnetic contribution rising up here. So you've got something from the substrate, and you've got some loose moments somewhere, some paramagnetic contribution. But happily, in the remnants, you can see very, very little. It's not completely flat, there's a little bit of something in there, but on this scale, 1 EMU percent cube is actually 0.01 of a Bohr magneton. So there's less than 0.01 of a Bohr magneton per manganese in the thin film. Again, you can try and do these null experiments of sweeping the field now, and again, pretty much within the noise, there's no remnants in there. So that's what you want to see. That's a simple piece of negative characterization. The susceptibility. Okay, we saw this in a form in Thomas's earlier on. That one nice thing is that the susceptibility of antiferromagnet can have a fairly characteristic behavior. It's not definitive, so ferrimagnets are rather similar. So obviously paramagnets, you've got a divergence at 0, T. You've got a divergence of ferromagnets at finite, so at the Curie point, but you only have a cusp at a near temper. In fact, you don't necessarily have a cusp because it depends where you apply the field with respect to the uniaxial. So, this is a uniaxial case. If you have a uniaxial ferromagnet and you apply the field perpendicular to it, you can actually induce a little bit of counter. And the susceptibility ends up to be pretty much temperature independent, because what happens is the rate at which the counting angle increases for a given applied field is inversely proportional to the rate at which the moment in the size of the magnetization increases. So the susceptibility stays pretty flat. However, if you apply the field along an easy axis where the moment is pointing, then the susceptibility drops all the way down towards 0. If you've got a polycrystalline sample, and all the early ones were polycrystalline, you can't really see this, okay? You really need a single crystal to see the problem. If you've got a polycrystalline, then it does something in between. Yeah, the historical stuff, it always seems to be manganese fluoride too, isn't it? They just make nice crystals always. But it's sort of beautiful, this susceptibility and its anisotropy. And if you make some new material and you saw that, you take that as a very, very strong indication that you really had a nice antiferromagnet, and this was a hard axis and this was an easy axis. Okay. And which is going a lot faster than I thought, but never mind. I'll do another few slides and then we'll have to have an extended break. I spent most of my lunch hour taking slides out because I thought I'd overrun. Okay, so behavior in larger fields. Okay, susceptibilities measures the response to the limits of low fields. What happens if you start putting larger fields on? Well, in the Stone-Wolfram single domain ferromagnet model, what you do is you just say you've got a simple system with uniaxial anisotropy, and you write down a model of the energy like this. So it's got the Zeeman energy in it, which depends on the cos of the sum of the angles between the two moments. And it's got an anisotropy energy in it. And what happens is, if you're at 90 degrees to the easy axis, then the moments just simply rotate around. You're just fighting against the uniaxial anisotropy, and the field goes up, reaches saturation. If you take it down again, there's no hysteresis, it goes down, goes to negative field, it does exactly the same thing. However, as we know, if you do the opposite, you put the applied field along the easy uniaxial axis here, then you start off in a certain magnetization, state, and nothing happens. Nothing happens until you the Zeeman energy is equal to the anisotropy energy, and then it flips. You get a spin flip, and the moments will just reverse from one direction to the other. In the energy landscape, it just rolls out of here into here. Right. So here's a material, ferrite, which is a very hard magnetic material, and you can see it's sort of a bit like that. You get a nice open square loop here, and just a slope here, but there's a bit of hysteresis for the direction that you think of as the easy axis, and the saturation point here is not the same for the outer plane and in plane. Easy axis, hard axis. And this approaches the ideal storm Wolfart behavior much better actually than most samples. So this is one of ours. This is actually gallium manganese arsenide phosphide, which has got a very strong outer plane anisotropy. And here, if you're in plane along the easy axis, that looks like an easy axis. If you're out of plane, that looks like a hard axis. But the coercivity here is tiny. And that's because if you're applying the field opposite the moment direction along the easy axis, then it's a metascale situation. So the system will tend to find some way to get from one field. So if possible, you'll get some sort of domain formation process. If you add any disorder, if you add edges to the sample, the domains will tend to find some way of nucleating. Oh, yes. Oh, this is MB growth. I told you it was slow. Okay, so this is magnets, but indeed, if you have a ferromagnetic material, it's very useful just to be able to do simple hysteresis loops like this, magnetization against field, and this is just demonstrating something that's interesting and novel at the time, or one of them. Whereas if you go gallium manganese arsenide on gallium arsenide, it's an biaxial compressive strain, and the strain is the most important thing that's determining the anisotropy here, and it forces the material to have a strong in-plane preference. It's actually turns out the uniaxial in plane for reasons that are not really clear still. Well, they're complex at least. Whereas oh, sorry, I said it wrong. No. Yeah, so in plane it's easy, and it's showing the switching. Out of plane, you have to drag the moments out, and then when you take the fear off, they just come back down. Here, it's drawn on relaxed Indian gallium arsenide, now in tensile strain, and it swaps the sign of the anisotropy swaps. So now it's got a strong uniaxial perpendicular plane behavior. I think I'll stop. I stopped early, I'm going. Oh, so this is another reason you see avoiding stray fields. Try not to mentally generate stray fields.
Okay, thank you.
So we're going to have a long break.
Are there questions to this part? Right. I have been given the impression that the reason why neutrons scattering is used for magnets is that the neutrons have no charge but only spin, and so interact only when there is dislocation. So why do they interact with the phonons?
Why do magnons interact with phonons?
Not magnets, neutrons. So I thought neutron spectroscopy was useful to draw magnets.
Yeah.
Because neutrons only interact with magnetic quasi-particles with all your...
No. No, the neutrons will scatter off the nucleus.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and so, yeah. They have an neutron.
But they will not interact...
Newtonian mechanics, they flash them.
But they will not interact with electrons, right?
That's right, they interact with the nucleus via the strong force. So it's a very, very short range interaction. So in neutron scattering, you get contribution from the nuclei. I had a section about these cross sections, but I took it out. And that's very, very dependent on the isotope and the Z number. It's very erratic to vary the scattering cross-section or the scattering length for the nuclei. But then any moment contribution will couple to the spin of the neutron.
More questions?
Yeah, very few literatures report the damping of antiferromagnetic by measuring the level of explosivity coated skin.
Sorry, I didn't really make that out.
Damping. He's asking about the damping. Damping measured from the width of the
Antiferromagnetic resonance.
Antiferromagnetic resonance.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert in this at all, but yeah, you can certainly, I mean, people do things like measuring the width of the antiferromagnetic resonance against temperature to get an idea about the degree, about the Magnon scattering. And it's Magnon scattering that determines those widths. But I've not done that myself.
Well, Alan is an expert on this, but I think she would say that the width of the curve, I mean, it scales with the resonance frequency, right? So you have in antiferromagnets, you have higher frequency, but you have also strong damping, if you want. Okay, so the precession time is much shorter, but also the damping time is much shorter. It scales also. It's also enhanced by this change.
I used to think that diffraction of the pinhole would be completely impossible, but you show that it is apparently possible. Can you comment on the lower limit for film papers or on the instrumentation?
Okay, it's probably better if the piece does, because he actually did the measurements.
Yes.
Okay.
But to the room.
So the lowest we've measured is about 100 nanometers. That was the data that Bryan showed, and the detection time was not insane. It was about an hour at its peak, about tens of counts. I think at the moment this was in which it's got a complete wraparound set of detectors. I think probably at 40 nanometers or something would be near their limit at the moment, and that's for a good quality crystal where the peak is relatively sharp. As soon as it starts on the wall,
But it's still relatively recent.
Yes.
I
think our measurements of that at which was the first time they've done something like that. It's becoming more common, but it's not trivial yet.
And then to try and do the inelastic neutron scattering, an order of magnitude more difficult.
More questions before break? Not, then let's have a coffee.